What's poppin', everybody? This is Logan Murdoch from Real Ones, and I have some big news to share. On Saturday, February 18th, the Ringer NBA show will be hitting the road for All-Star Weekend for a live show in Salt Lake City. You heard that right. We are taping the pod in front of a live audience in Salt Lake next month, and we want you to join us. Pull up on us at the Stateroom in the heart of downtown Salt Lake. You can grab your tickets now at thestateroom.com. That's thestateroom.com. Doors open at 9 o'clock. Show is at 10. It's going to be a 21 and up event. Come hang with the gang and chat, mid-season updates, draft preview, and even have a Q&A with us. Space is limited, so grab your tickets while they last at thestateroom.com. Hope to see y'all in there.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day, or hiking, or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details.
Welcome back to another episode of the Ringers NBA Draft Show. My name's Kevin O'Connor. Kyle Mann. How you doing, man?
Solid. I'm doing okay. Got some Mexican food in my belly. You know, got the baby down to sleep. Gonna relax and just kind of kick back and do some redrafting with my main guy, KOC.
Amazing. So we're recording on Tuesday night, which means you'll have this in your feed on Wednesday overnight or Wednesday morning, whenever it pops up. And as Kyle just said, we're doing a redraft today of the 2021 NBA draft. We did the 2022 way too early redraft way back. What was it, December when we did that, Kyle? I think the 2022 redraft.
Life is a vortex of time, KOC. I don't remember anything. Honestly, don't remember. I did a pod earlier and I don't remember that. That's kind of where I have goldfish memory. I do this thing. I was thinking.
You definitely don't have goldfish memory. You have amazing references, recall, all that.
For stuff like that, but for like things that happened, I have horrible memory. I was thinking earlier, I don't know if you're like this. I have awful goldfish memory for if I locked my car with my remote or not. Like I'll just forget 2 seconds later. I'll be like, I have like, I don't know what that is.
Isn't that more like checking, like OCD, like checking style thing, like that type of habit, like leaving the hairdryer.
That's
like that
the classic
type of thing,
one.
you know.
I just like Jessie says he does that too. I don't know what that is. I just always I'll be like, I'm pretty sure I just locked it. How did I forget? I'll just like forget 2 seconds later. I don't know. That's just a random.
Or it's like when you walk into the room. Why did I walk in here?
I do a little bit of that. I definitely like with parent brain. I'll like ask people questions that I forget that I've already asked them. Like. I definitely do that one. Rob was teasing me the other day. Mahoney was teasing me. He was like, we already had this conversation about a band I asked him about. So I think your RAM, like I've said on this show before, your RAM is a little compromised when you become a parent. You kind of, you forget things like that, you know, stats and players and stuff I'll remember, but little stuff I forget.
Well, Kyle, we've on the NBA, in the NBA world, we've talked a lot about some of the players in the 2021 draft. So with a couple of weeks till the deadline, kind of a little past the midway point here where we thought it was a good time to do the redraft. This is more of like a re-ranking. So if guys go out of order, it's not like we're saying the Pistons would have drafted. What would the Pistons look like if they drafted this guy instead of Cade Cunningham? It's more of just we're re-ranking, restacking these prospects, and those conversations can kind of come up as we go. So let's have you go first. I went first in the 22 redraft. Let's have you go first in the 21 redraft, Kyle. Who are you taking, number one?
Well, you know, you asked the question, it would be interesting if the Pistons did this or they did that instead, all the sliding doors things. And I think those are interesting questions to ask. Me personally, I didn't have this person number one and that on my big board, but looking back, if I were to re-rank this class and I had the opportunity to pick first, I would pick Evan Mobley first. That's my pick.
Okay, so we know Mobley's an elite defensive player, versatile, switchable, good shot blocker, super coordinated, good rebounder, can, pass. Not that he has that role a lot for Cleveland, but he can. The scoring comes and goes. They go through Mitchell and Garland. Why Mobley over Cunningham, though? Like, what is the separating factor at this point after a year and a half now when you said you originally didn't have him ahead of Cunningham? What's changed there for you, Kyle?
The Cunningham conversation, which we're going to loop back to in more detail, but I think for me, if you're going to look at it specifically at Mobley, I just feel like maybe in the past 2 or 3 years, it's been impressed upon me just how valuable defenders of Mobley's type are. The guys that are highly switchable. Now, granted, he ends up guarding, he doesn't have like an even distribution between like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's heavier in the 4-5, as is Jared Allen. He's playing with another guy who's pretty switchable, can play that way. He's benefiting from playing with great guards, but I just think that type of defender, that archetype, I've come philosophically in the past 2 or 3 years, like I said, to really value those guys at the most. So I think that he's a guy who's like a 3-level defender, as I've said a million times. And I think he's he could be a playoff anchor for a championship team. I really believe that. So that's why I would take Mobley number 1.
Pistons fans are screaming right now. They're saying, yeah, but he's not a guy who can carry the offense for your team. He's not an energizer like Cade Cunningham. Have you soured there with Cade, with what he is?
Well, I was going to say he doesn't need to be, first of all. But secondly, I would say if we were going to flip this and talk about who Cade is, I think where I've shifted on Cade, I still personally on my board would have Cade 2. But I haven't moved off of that just because of the sample things that we'll talk about in a minute. I think what shifted for me, and I kind of felt this way going into the draft, I did not think that he was a Harden Luka type. Like when we talked about it, I was like,
no, of course not. Of course not.
People scoffed and they were like, he's not a Helio spread pick and roll, heavy load type guy. No, he goes on and off the ball, number 1. Like he does have more versatility. I still think he's super malleable offensively. I still think that he is going to be a great playmaker. I just don't. I was trending that direction near the draft. I don't think that he's a heavy load offensive engine type player. I think he's more like a malleable, closer. I don't know if I want to make that comparison, but that's kind of where I am. I've shifted away from that. Him as like an heavy offensive primary.
So, I mean, with Cade, he's still a good mid-range shooter. He's a great free throw shooter. He's not shot well from 3 at 31% so far in his career. How much has that played into your decision to favor Mobley over Cunningham at this point, though?
It's the biggest thing. It's unavoidable. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's like, he came into this season. He's only played, I think, like 12 games. He's only played 76 total games in his career. Obviously he's out with the shin injury now, which seems like a pretty big problem. But whenever you get the lower leg kind of stuff. But the shooting has just been bad, man. I mean, like, it's really only been, and I worried about this with him in high school some when I watched his EYBL, when I watched some of his stuff before he was at Montverde. The shooting was really inconsistent, and I was like, it looks great. The free throw shooting's great. All the other stuff encourages me. I love the defensive stuff. I think he's going to be solid. He's a smart player. Like I said, he can fit in. He's a universal donor, like we talked about with Halliburton. Not quite the passer, but he's only really shot well in like one quadrant of his career so far, and that was like the second quarter of his rookie season. He shot like 40% from 3. Every other sample, it's been at about 30%. And if you look at, in college, he shot 40%. It's a little worrisome. It's kind of in the rearview mirror, like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. I can kind of feel it bearing down on my feelings on him. I hope that we get some positive movement. I don't know. How do you feel about Cade?
I'm not taking him second. I'm taking Josh Giddey. And the reason why with Cunningham is he has never shot the ball as well as Josh Giddey has over the last 2 months. Since December 1st, Josh Giddey is shooting 39% on 64 catch-and-shoot threes, 40% on 50 pull-up twos, 91% from the free throw line with all the work he's done with Chip England. So if you think about Giddey versus Cade, I understand the majority of people probably are still taking Cade here, and I don't necessarily argue against that. Cade is fantastic in his own way. But the injury aspect needs to be factored in here. He had season-ending surgery on his left shin, but Giddey has become the better playmaker. He's the better at-rim finisher. He's the better rebounder. He's comparable defensively. He's a whole year younger. He's taller. And like I just said, for 2 months now, he's been shooting the ball better than Cunningham ever has in his entire life. So I think right now you look at Giddey and Cunningham. Giddey, since December 1st, 17 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 6 assists per game, not turning the ball over, playing good on defense, playing some, good competitive winning basketball for the Thunder. Give me Josh Giddey, the guy who I had ranked too low personally, and looks like he may have been a major steal for the Thunder.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I don't disagree with. I mean, you could get in and we could go back and forth about I think that whether you believe in Giddey shooting more than Cunningham shooting is the swing variable here for me. I believe in Cade's dribble pull-up shooting coming around more. Whereas Giddey could encounter issues with that. But the lucky thing for him is that he plays with a trio of guards that's just better than Detroit's right now. And I think that's a huge thing for OKC. I love Giddey. So that's an important thing, too, to say about this exercise is the one over the other thing kind of makes you think that it's absolute, a binary situation. It's I'm a huge Josh Giddey fan. I think he's a fantastic player.
Where would you have Giddey ranked personally? You said you have Cade 2 still, right? So it'd be Mobley 1, Cade 2. Are you would you have taken Giddey 3rd if I had taken Cade? Would that have been your selection?
I had Giddey 4 on my re-rank. I had him just behind another big German guy.
So that means you're taking Cade next at 3.
Yes, my next pick, and we've alluded to some of it. I think the first season 2 was I wrote some of this last year, and I could tweet out the link again about some of what I thought was plaguing him during his rookie year with Detroit, in terms of their crowded elevator offense, and he didn't have he was basically lacking. And that's another thing to consider too is last year he was lacking a pick and pop big, he was lacking a rim roller, he was lacking consistent shooters. They've little bit started to address some of those things with the Pistons. Now the Pistons are still terrible. Killian has stepped in and had a little has seized a moment. Oh yeah. There you go, KOC. I just think that we didn't really get to see Cade come in and get his bearings with those pieces. I'm not saying that Duren, or I'm not saying that Duren is anything special yet, but we haven't gotten to see them work things out. So that's another thing. And you have to weigh too, the injury thing matters. I mean, the stress of that is definitely a factor, but I really wish we could have seen him work it out with the pieces they have now.
Can I ask a theoretical question that has a 8% chance of happening? If the Pistons land the number 2 pick and they are in a position to take Scoot Henderson, what do you do in that situation if you're Detroit? Are you taking Scoot and building with him and Cade and moving off Killian? Or are you doing something dramatic and moving Cade for a major haul and building with Scoot? What do you do? Do you trade down from the number 2 pick and try to get a Cam Whitmore, a wing type of guy, a Brandon Miller? What do you do if you're the Pistons and you have the 2nd pick? It's just a scenario that I kind of love to see unfold after the lottery, because it would be very, very interesting from a trade standpoint with what could happen. They drafted Ivy last year.
I know. And I thought that was a great pickup. I don't, there's so much is incomplete here. I think we can speak about trends, but I don't know that we can solidly, concretely. I know that's not the fun thing to hear, but I mean, Scoot, I've already told you that I've wobbled on him at 2 already. Mm-hmm. So it's
yes, I kind of, you have.
I mean, Brandon Miller would be freaking incredible with the Pistons.
What a fit, huh?
He'd be amazing. And you get another guy out there that can play make. And like I said, Cade fits with those types of guys because he's one of the more active catch and shoot relocate guys. He doesn't need to dominate the ball to provide the things that he does. I'm still all in on Cade. I think him and Miller would be amazing. I think you create problems for yourself if you took Scoot. You take another guy that has maybe potential shooting questions. Okay, so now we have 4 guys who are under 24 years old who have shooting questions that want to have the ball in their hands or not. I think that's doesn't that seem like just throwing another element into the cocktail that might not work, might not be cohesive.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean it would be a major risk, and I think that's why it's so fascinating to me. What would they do in that scenario? Because with Cade, like you said, we talked about it earlier, the 3-point shot has not developed yet. He's shooting 40+% on pull-up twos. It's not like he's a lockdown, like a knockdown guy. but it's not like he's a liability from pull-up to range, but he's yet to see that free throw success or the touch near the basket translate into anything, outside of the paint. And that's where with Cunningham, I have a bit of concern here with what level he will be as a shooter. And I'm not out. I still like Cade. But I'd even consider taking Jalen Green ahead of him. But I also love Jalen Green probably way too much. With the fourth pick, though, so far we have Mobley 1, Giddey 2. You took Cade 3. You had mentioned a German guy in passing there, Franz Wagner. Franz Wagner will be my pick here at number 4. I was looking up some Wagner stats earlier today, Kyle, in preparation for this podcast. And I mean, just to give the basic stats so far this season for Orlando, he's at over 20 points per game, 20.4 points, shooting 37% from 3, 86% from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Like, he's putting up numbers, playing good defense for that team. The thing that stuck out to me was on second spectrum, right? So this season, he's running 18.4 pick and rolls per game. That's a lot. So
we saw that
season,
coming.
It's a ton. Last season, it was a 10.5. So just to compare his 18.4 this season to some other, bigger forwards and whatnot, Siakam, 16.5, Tatum, 16.8, Kawhi, 14.6, Kevin Durant, 13.5, Zion, 9.3, Bojan Bogdanovic, 8.5, and his teammate Banchero is at 15.5. So Wagner's running a hell of a lot of pick and rolls for guys who are, bigger forwards that have the ball in their hands a lot. And I think that's indicative of the trust that the Magic have in him to run offense, his versatility as a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", who can be used off ball, who can cut, who can screen, who can roll, who can do all of that stuff. And yet he's using a lot of pick and rolls per game and doing a good job at it. The Magic score 1.03 points per pick and roll run by Wagner, up from 0.94 last year. So it's not like he's, in the Luka territory in terms of or Harden and pure dominance, but it's a good number for a young guy at this point of his career. And I would expect that number to only go up over the course of time. And if we do one of these redrafts in another year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Wagner's even higher than number 4.
It could happen, man. It really could. He could ascend as high as 1 if things really go wild. I was going to tell you that in 2021, it's funny just to think about how these things play out. That in 2021 on draft night, if I had said to you, Kevin, Orlando got their primary ball handler and primary playmaker, what would you have said that night? You would have been like, "Yep, they got Jalen Suggs." Wow, what a coup that the Raptors didn't take him. Who saw this coming, man? Who saw this coming? His role, what he was going to be. What was your projection of him when he was coming into the draft?
I had Wagner ranked 10th, which was too low. My evaluation of him, I think was spot on. I mean, the ranking was too low, but in there, I said unselfish playmaker, rarely turns the ball over. In some systems, he could be a major threat facilitating from the elbow areas, running dribble handoffs with shooters, or serve as the ball handler or screener in the pick and roll. So, coordinated, decisive scorer, blah, blah, blah. It's glue guy skills. Glue guy skills is probably the main note there. I thought Wagner, the reason why I had him 10th and not 4 or 5, because I was like, okay, realistically, he's going to be more of a guy who's, part of an offense and not someone who's more of a primary initiator for your team. But what Orlando has with Banchero, with Fultz, even Bol sometimes bringing the ball up the floor, they just have a bunch of guys. Wendell Carter, DHOs, so many different guys that can handle the ball, make plays, make the right pass, make the smart pass. I think Orlando is building something really, really special with what they have right now, with all their size and versatility. And I talked about this with Verno on the mismatch on Tuesday. Jonathan Isaac coming back too at 6'10" with his defensive versatility. And if he continues to trend up offensively, dude, Orlando is going to be able to put out teams with the smallest guy as Franz Wagner.
Yeah, I brought this up to Sear today that Orlando just has. I know that it's been odd with the Jonathan Isaac. There are a lot of non-basketball variables there that are weird, and I know people are trying to figure out how they feel about those things within the NBA landscape. I know that's a particularly interesting sort of construct for that, but it is interesting that they have
completely irrelevant to basketball aspect, and his teammates Banchero have raved about him. So, he's one of the first guys who texted me. He's been in constant touch with me. Isaac's a good teammate.
Yeah. If you look at that, though, like in the basketball sense purely, it is wild that I remember, you want to talk about Mark of Charks. Charks loved Jonathan Isaac. Loved him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was one of his dudes. And I just think it's crazy that I think Isaac was considered, I know we're getting on an Isaac thing here, but like, it's crazy just that he was considered one of the best like young defensive prospects in all of basketball, and people have just kind of forgotten about him. And I think it's really interesting that the Magic have built their team the way that you're describing. I would like the touch percentage, the way their team operates is interesting because like I drew this up the other day coincidentally that their touches are split pretty evenly between Banchero and Wagner, 15.6 and 15.3. And then their guards are totally secondary. Like Fultz and Suggs and Cole Anthony are all like 9, 10, 7. I think this team is an interesting experiment. They're a fascinating experiment. And I'm really, really curious to see particularly who they're going to add in the upcoming draft. I think I'm going to be one of the most exciting things about this draft for me is going to be seeing who they add to this.
For sure. No doubt about it. And for what it's worth, I just pulled up Charks' rankings from 2017 and the draft guide that year. Fultz 1, Lonzo 2, Isaac was 3rd. I forgot he had Isaac 3rd. I knew he had OG 4 or 5. OG Anunoby was 4th, Josh Jackson 5, Dennis Smith 6th, De'Aaron Fox 7, Malik Monk 8, Tatum 9, Zach Collins, remember him? Number 10. Zach
Yes.
Collins just hasn't worked out at all.
No.
But yeah, I remember Charks loved Isaac and OG that year, and he was right about both of them. It's just Isaac's been hurt. OG, after the torn ACL in college, has managed to stay healthy and turn into one hell of a player. Kyle, you're up next with the number 5 pick.
Number 5, I'm going to pick a guy who's kind of had some volatility. He's started a little slow this year, but Scotty Barnes at number 5 from the Toronto Raptors. I think that Barnes absolutely works still as like a connective playmaker, a switchable defender. When he's bought in, when he's active, it hasn't been consistent. I know there's been like frustration on that front. I think he's one of the true guys that can really spread his switchability across the whole range positionally. He's been shooting wise pretty inconsistent. He's still only 21 years old. This year he's averaging 15.6 overall, 4.8 assists, 7.1 rebounds, 30% roughly from 3 on 2.9 assists. But in the last 10 games, he's actually been playing a lot better. It's been on an uptick, 18 points, 5 assists, 7 rebounds, and 35.3%. Shooting a few less. He's still pretty much like a spot-up shooter. The dribble pull-up stuff, I don't know that it'll ever get there. I kind of expect him to sort of be a release valve shooter for the duration of his career, but I still like Scotty, and I think he's a playoff player. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I think with Barnes, good player. I voted him Rookie of the Year. I was, beating the drum hard for him last year, and I think it was the right choice. I think the media made the right choice voting him as Rookie of the Year. It was just such an underwhelming start to his season. Like he was like so bad compared to what the expectations were. But I think that makes things difficult when you expect a player to improve and they don't. It only makes frustration grow more. But he's doing a good job of defenses have kind of defended him like Ben Simmons. They just sag off of him. But he's done a good job of, unlike Simmons, driving into that space, drawing 2 defenders, finding an open teammate, or just rumbling his way into the basket with spin moves and euros and all that. Barnes is a smart player, and I think with him over the course of time, the next step, like for him to be, higher the next time we do one of these redrafts for 2021, the defense needs to improve. Like I think I want to see Barnes really become somebody who's locking down some of those smaller, quicker, leaner wings. He's too slow-footed right now. That's the number one area he needs to improve on defense. He's good off ball, good help. He provides size. He can defend forwards. He's big. But to really maximize his defensive versatility, that's the thing I want to see him get much better at.
Yeah, I don't know that he's going to be a tough assignment 1-2 positional kind of guy. I feel like he's more likely to take tough assignments full time, like 3-4, which is okay, but can he stand up on an island in stints? I do think that he could get to that point and be that type of defender. A lot of it's effort though, man. For me, the Scotty Barnes I've seen in the past has been active enough to do that. I feel like for me, it's been just, has he been locked in and engaged? And in the past 10 games, I've seen an uptick on that front from him.
Next up, 6th pick, I'm going with Jalen Green. Jalen Green with Houston, it's been an up and down season for him. A lot of stinkers, a lot of disappointing games, a lot of, your turn, my turn. That's not all his fault with that Rockets team, with the way they play, the tanking. But what happened on Monday night against the Timberwolves, to me, that is the formula moving forward for him. Him and Alperen Sengun ran a ton of DHOs, a ton of pick and roll. Jalen Green is somebody where when the offense is moving, when the ball's whipping around the floor, that's when he's at his best. And so I think judging this Rockets team, the way they've played, how stagnant they've been, that's not what they want to be. That is not what they will be if things turn out the way they should. And I think for Jalen Green, those highs are like 42 against Minnesota, 41 against Charlotte, the big game he had against Boston earlier this season, the game he had against New Orleans was a good one, the Memphis game, like he's had some bangers. Like to me, like whether it's when the ball's moving or when he's on a heater out of isolations and pick and roll, to me, that's the Jalen Green that I'm thinking about long term. And I said it in passing earlier, I might take Green over Cade right now. I'm not all the way there because Cade's been so much better defensively. He's been a better passer, but and Jalen Green has been inefficient as well across the board. Every play type, the shot hasn't clicked yet for him. He's shooting only 33.8% from three in his career, 78.7% from the free throw line. But damn, dude, like the highs from Jalen Green at just 20 years old are remarkable.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is you're talking about his shooting and his efficiency. For him, it's more his issues are different than Cade's, in the fact that, and we knew this coming into the draft, is that cleaning up the types of looks that he was going to take were going to really have an impact on his efficiency. When he's moving, when he gets a rhythm, it's almost like kind of Jamal. He's not the shooter that Murray is, but I think he's that type of player that does really well when he's playing with momentum. The thing last night that was amazing was just he was getting on and off the ball quickly. I know I talk about that a lot, but like I think that's a really key thing for a guy his size, like going downhill against a set defense with like his sort of stresses within his game and his build. I just don't expect him to be a pick apart a set defense type player. He really maximizes the things that he's good at when his willingness to pass the ball to Sengun, to make a cut. Some of the most beautiful plays they had last night were plays like that, where he give it, get it back, give it, get it back. He's really tough to guard when he plays that way. I hope he keeps doing it.
Are you taking Sengun next?
I am actually taking Trey Murphy next at number 7.
Why over Sengun? I'm offended.
Well, I'm coming into this with a playoff mentality. Right now, I feel like I'm more confident that I can keep Trey Murphy's contributions, which are good, on the floor. Sengun, I like him. I mean, what's not to like? He's like one of the most offensively talented young bigs that we have in basketball right now. I think that Murphy defensively is going to be able to hold up. We've already seen him do some of that. I think that his shooting's incredible. I just think he has the upside to become... people talk about him sometimes like he has no upside, like he's going to stay what he is forever. I don't think that that's the case. I think he was underrated as an athlete coming into the league. He's a versatile shooter. He's enormous. We've talked about him on this show. I love Trey Murphy. I think he's a great player. Yeah. I think the Pelicans got a heck of a steal. I underrated him I didn't have him high enough coming into the draft.
I had Murphy 13th on my board. So I liked Murphy. And even then, he's been better than what I could have expected. I mean, like the shooting ability, he's 40+%. He can shoot off movement, spot up. He's smart. He can, he had games earlier this year with Ingram out where he was able to step up his scoring. I'm with you, Kyle. And I think, his last year at Virginia, he showed, and he does this with New Orleans too, but he can pass a little bit. He's not like a creator. He's not a guy who's going to be running pick and roll like we talked about with Wagner, but he can attack a closeout and make the right pass. He's a kind of a connective piece in that sense, and he's a good defender. I mean, I think Murphy is a fine pick at number 7. But I'd take Sengun there personally ahead of Murphy, just because I think Sengun is somebody who, we saw it in that game with Jalen Green. He runs 9.3 dribble handoffs per game. That's third in the NBA behind Domantas Sabonis and Nikola Jokic, right next to Bam Adebayo. Monday night with Jalen Green, they ran 14 dribble handoffs together, a season high for them, scored 16 points, which, by the way, is the second most all season long behind only Murray and Jokic. during the month of December. So they had a great night. They do it a lot. They're never that efficient because these guys are young. But with Sengun, that's somebody who can help run your offense in a number of different ways. He can make you pay as a scorer. He can pick and pop for three. And his efficiency needs to improve over the course of time. That goes without saying. But that dude can pass. He can score. He can handle. And defensively, yes, he needs to improve. Yes, he needs to get quicker. But he hustles. He rebounds. I really like Sengun a whole bunch.
He's got a little mean streak in him. Like he's got a little sassy, like step to you thing about him that I do enjoy with Sengun. I was pulling this up while you were talking. So we're looking at like Jokic is 27 now. Sabonis is 26. Sengun is 20. It's easy to look at those guys as they are now and just rave, and we do, and we love them, and they're awesome. They have gotten to the point of, pardon the pun, passability. They've gotten to the point of tolerance defensively. Basically, just get your mouth above water and don't drown defensively. That's what we're talking about. In 6 years, this is the argument for Sengun, I think. In 6 years, you think he gets there? Athletically, you think, IQ-wise, I know he can do it. The way he sees the floor. I think that's the argument. Do you expect him defensively to be there when he's 26, 27 years old?
Yes, I do, for sure. I think with Sengun, the offense is there already right now. You know, he's last 10 games, he's 19 points per game, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, limiting turnovers. And like you said, defensively, like right now you can analyze it and say, okay, he's a liability, doesn't block a ton of shots. He's not like a switchable guy. He's a drop coverage guy. But as you said, Kyle, he hustles. It's about, how does he improve athletically over the next 5-6 years to get to a point that he's passable? And by the way, it also depends on personnel. Houston right now has the worst odds in the NBA. If they end up landing Victor Wembanyama and it's a Wembanyama Sengun, front court with Jabari Smith at the wing, like suddenly you're looking at Sengun and you're like, okay, maybe on the perimeter one-on-one I'm a little worried, but Wembanyama is helping in the paint. Jabari Smith is helping in the paint. Like it's all so much about system on defense too, where I think the hustle, the intensity, like you said, he has a mean streak to him. All of that for me gives me confidence that he'll maximize whatever he's going to be athletically. And he has all of those intangibles on top of that to become a guy that's going to be, at worst, passable on defense and somebody who can help really be a facilitator, an important facilitator and scorer for your offense.
He's so young, man. Too. Like 20 years, like, and his athletic or his at the rim bag is ahead of Sabonis at the same age. I mean, like he's already got better touch. The shooting thing, you could convince me. I'm going to sit here and convince myself. As I love when I do this, I like talk to myself in real time into it. But no, I think conversation kind of like surfaces some of these things. I think that's totally possible. As competitive as he is, I could see him do it. I mean, we were frustrated with Jokic when he was like 25, 24. It went on for a long time. So some of these cakes take a little bit of time to bake. I could see it happening for Sengun.
Who are you taking ninth?
This is tough. It's kind of the same philosophy that pushed me to take Trey. I liked this guy, but I had him too low. I think that Quentin Grimes is a guy that's going to contribute to a playoff team really soon. I think that's probably my biggest just kind of, I was like, fuck it, let's do it. He's a good shooter. I think coming out of college, we saw more pick and roll spot up versatility flipping back and forth between those when he was at Houston. We haven't seen as much of that from him on ball in the league, but defensively, I love him. I think he could shoot the ball. I think he's a guy that he could play. He's a playoff type player, to repeat myself there. I think he's a good player. I like Quentin Grimes. And he was a first round pick. It's not like a crazy thing, but I think when you start weighing him against these other guys, I'll be curious to see what you have to say about it.
So right now, still left on the board from the top 10, Jalen Suggs. He has not been selected. Jonathan Kuminga, Davion Mitchell, Zaire Williams. I think Grimes over Williams right now, pretty clear with how well Grimes has played for the Knicks. Mitchell has done nothing of real substance for the Kings. I like Mitchell, but I don't love him. He hasn't shot the ball well. Suggs hurt last year, hasn't done much this year. Kuminga, hasn't done much for the Warriors.
Yeah.
If you're like right now, if you're taking Grimes, you're favoring more certainty.
Yeah.
Does he still have upside, though, too? Do you see upside in Grimes as well?
It's weighing certainty, or it's weighing your intrigued level of upside, like over a guy like a Kuminga, even a Zaire. I was going to ask you about Zaire versus Trey Murphy. That's the one that I feel like I probably was off the most on. I just feel like with Grimes, I'm certain I'm less concerned. Like I know that like if we go into a series, I'm not just like, okay, they're going to pick on Grimes. They're not going to guard Grimes. I know that he's going to fit into. He's a dependable handler. He's not like a huge difference maker. He's just somebody that is like low risk for me. So that's why I like Grimes. He's guarding on ball a ton. He's in the 96th percentile for drives defended per 100, but he's already a plus defender in year 2. So for guys his age, that is not completely common, but he's hovered at about like 36, 37, 38% from 3, 40% on catch and shoots. I just think Grimes is a dependable guy on a good team. What more do you want?
2 years older than Jonathan Kuminga, but Kuminga has stunk overall compared to expectations. And I'm taking Kuminga here 10th, though, because he's still only 20 years old. You still have a guy who's 6'8", great length, has shown versatility on defense, has really, at times been a stopper on defense. He's had great moments on the defensive end for the Warriors. The issue is the fact that he's inefficient at pretty much everything on offense except for finishing around the basket off of cuts and, dives out of the screen and roll and all that. This second season of his career compared to last season, he's shooting worse from 2-point range, 59% to 56%, shooting worse from three-point range, 34% to 28%, shooting worse from the free throw line, 68% to 65%. He has not shown any improvement as a ball handler, facilitator necessarily. I mean, if you're the Warriors right now, you have Kuminga and you still see glimmers. You still see like little moments of why you drafted him in the first place with the 7th pick, with all that upside and all that versatility. But damn, dude, I mean, he just has not popped at all offensively this year.
Yeah, a lot of the worries have just kind of lingered. Granted, he's been in a situation that has not been super developmentally friendly in terms of like getting the types of reps that he would need to grow. But you would think he'd be. We saw glimpses last year where he.
I disagree, Kyle. I disagree. He's played 35. He's played 35 games out of what, 49, 50 for the Warriors.
No, it's the usage.
Enough.
It's the usage type, Kev. I'm not talking. You could play 100 games, but if you're playing,
what has he done to deserve that? Then people are complaining, like Houston, saying, "Oh, they're giving all these young guys these touches." Oh, get some veterans. Give Jamal Crawford a job. I mean, like, come on. Like he hasn't
Jamal
shown
Crawford
he can handle
league.
those touches.
No, I mean it's the usage type. I think the type he really needs to develop his like spatial, just they call it, processing jargon alert. He needs to grow in that part of the game, and that was what we talked about him when he was in high school. It's what we talked about with Ignite. It was clear as day. Like he just is very behind as a playmaker. I was gonna check in. We talked a lot about comps with Green. Imagine we have one of my little like dorky graphs. Is he closer to like the Jeff Green side of things? Like somebody, where do we see him in terms of what he's panning out to be right now? Or is he going to remain just sort of this, I don't know. The way it's trending, he's going to end up bouncing around. Like I feel like the bouncing is going to start if the Warriors decide to punt him here soon.
Oh, Kuminga?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope he's on the Jeff Green side of things. What's on the other side?
I don't know. I was trying to think what's the other side. I think, what did I say?
I had Luol Deng as a comp for him in the draft guide. Good luck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that feels like a bit much right now.
Good Lord. I bet that the Warriors would die for him to become Luol Deng. Oh, my God.
I know. I mean, that's the thing for Golden State right now. They're in this position where you see the heights of what they were last year, winning a title, and then you see the inconsistencies, even with Steph being back. They're still under 500 right now. And I think if you're Golden State, you got to think long and hard here about going after an OG Anunoby. Just making an all-in offer, giving up Wiseman, Kuminga, 2 future first-round draft picks. Can anybody beat that offer? Maybe. There was a report in the Toronto Star this week. The mystery team offered 3 first-round draft picks for OG Anunoby. we don't know the quality of those picks. They might be, crappy picks. They might be protected picks. We don't know any further details. But if the Warriors were to offer Wiseman, Kuminga, and their 27 and 29 firsts, would you do that if you're the Warriors, first of all?
You're saying trade them to the Raptors for OG
and Anunoby. Wiseman, Kuminga, 27 and 29. So that's a former number 2 pick, a former number 7 pick, and then 2 future firsts for OG and Anunoby, one of the best defensive players in all of basketball, good spot up shooter. We love it. We know OG.
I probably would. How
about Toronto? Assume that's the best offer on the table. OG is a youngster still, 25.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know that I would either, because the Raptors are working from the benefit of having seen them, and they're a smart organization. Can I say something really quick about the Warriors here? This is going to be critical of an organization I've been a fan of, like their moves in the history. I've been impressed. They abandoned the philosophy that got them here, man. They did. They abandoned if you go back and look at their personnel moves, like over the years, they picked guys that were great thinkers, that were high quality decision makers, and that had pedigree I just think and then they went for athleticism upside. I think that they abandoned the philosophy that got them, that made them the organization that they are. And now they have this existing construct. And it's really obvious when you look at it and you're like, you have this existing smart organism that flows. It's all about quick reaction times and reads and shooting and things like that. And these guys can't mesh with it. That's the clearest thing. They're just dragging them along, trying to get them. And granted, they're still young. There's still time. It could come around. I just, that's kind of how I'm feeling about the Warriors right now, man. I just think that they kind of were not true to themselves.
I think that's on point. Really. It does feel that way with Golden State. And now they're in a position, they just win a finals, right? I mean, they just won the finals despite some of those decisions.
But it's stressing them now. It didn't stress them.
It's just like like them in a redraft. Just imagine if they had taken, LaMelo instead of Wiseman, Wagner instead of Kuminga. As great as it's been. Whoa! Just imagine in an alternate timeline if they had those guys instead. The 2-timeline approach would have been absolutely perfect in that scenario.
Oh my God, man. It is crazy to think about. But yeah, it is wild to think about the players that they could have just because of that sort of shift in philosophy, which I think was a mistake.
For the 11th pick, who are you taking, Kyle?
I originally had Herb here. Transparency. I went in here and did this. I just quickly, I didn't even know if you noticed that I did it. I had Herb here. I love Herb. The shooting thing, when the shooting was trending up, if it had continued that way, it's come back to earth a little bit. Herb got up in the 30, I think he got 31, 32% last year. Did he might have even hit 33. I don't have it in front of me, but it's come back to earth a little. He's 30.1%, 30% in his last 10 games, 10 points, steal and a half. I still think that he is valuable in a playoff sense. I worry about the ways that teams are going to exploit them. We've seen it at different times. The Bucks, when they played the Pelicans, literally didn't guard him, and that's a problem. We've seen it with these guys that provide the defensive plus. He's plus 2.6 in defensive Raptor. Granted, he's 24 years old. The Pelicans have kind of struggled lately, 3-9 in their last 12 without all of their personnel. I went ahead, I'm explaining Herbert Jones, but I went ahead and took Bones Highland here. Oh, you took Herb. You switched. I just noticed that you did that. I took Bones Highland just because I think he's going to grow he's a little immature right now, as we've talked about, but I think he's somebody that's going to be able to stay on the floor. And he's proven that he can score at this level. He played in the playoffs last year. That's what I went ahead and did.
I think it's a fair pick. Highland, he goes 26 in the draft out of VCU, bucket getter in college. And that's exactly what he is in the NBA. And he does a damn good job of it.
Yeah.
And
that's who he is.
It's a nice player to have. And I think with Bones going 11 here with your selection, that moves him ahead of Jalen Suggs, Davion Mitchell, James Bouknight. 3 guards drafted in the lottery right now who we have not selected yet. Is there any hope for a Suggs to rise back up and, restore some value here? Because I think that for a Magic fan, they're happy about the Wagner talk. They can't be super happy about Suggs with what he's done so far in the league. Like, do you see any silver linings with him so far in his career?
I mean, it ain't over if you want a silver lining. I mean, we're assessing it as we see it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some Suggs people I hear from. There's some Suggs stands out there that I typically, anytime I mention Suggs, I get some kind of comment.
There are Suggs stands? I never heard of them.
I think they're just Magic people who are excited about Suggs. I don't know if they've continued their fervency over time. I don't know if they've kept that same energy, Kev. I mean, the shooting, he looked really sped up last year. It hasn't evened out. And he's been in and out again. He's kind of had the similar thing with Cade where he's been in and out. I just want to see shooting consistency. I do believe in him defensively. It's kind of the same thing. Like, I think he'll be a solid player. He could definitely, I could see him moving up as high as, 8, 9, 10 range. It could happen in this draft. Yeah. I'd have a harder time believing past that. But if those things level out, I could see that.
It doesn't help that Markelle Fultz stole his job. Ever since last year, Fultz has been so good for Orlando. But that speaks to how development is never linear. Fultz is 24 years old right now. And Suggs, maybe in a couple of years, he's only 21 right now. Maybe in 3 years, Jalen Suggs is starting for a team and looking really good. It's possible.
Yeah, what would we have said about Fultz? Like, at the same age, we were just like, it's not going to happen, blah, 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 blah. It's like, these things, you nail it. It's not always linear. It can go, the roller coaster can go up and come back down. It's like, you never know.
I'll be taking Herb Jones. You talked about him. All the flaws are real. His shot has taken a step back this season. You hope that can improve with the tutelage of Fred Vinson, their shooting coach. It's been much worse. The way you nailed it when you mentioned that Bucks game, they were sagging off him. That's going to be the playoff treatment that Herb Jones sees all the time. And unless he improves, he will be somebody that is not finishing games for the New Orleans Pelicans come playoff time. But with that said, he's still one of the best defenders in all of basketball. He's a smart offensive player, good cutter, hustles, makes the right play all the time. All that really needs to happen, like you said with Grimes or Trey Murphy, all that needs to happen is for that spot-up jumper to be reliable. Who you taking 13th?
I would tack the last thing I would say on there is that he's going to benefit a lot from their full infrastructure being there. I mean, that's hurting him too. When you take away the pieces and it's, you get it.
They're missing key guys.
To put it mildly, I'm going to throw one at you, Kev. I'm taking Santi Aldama.
Oh, yeah.
At 13.
Chris Vernon, somewhere out there, he's screaming. He's excited.
Verno's slapping the top of the roof of his car like Jeffrey Lebowski right now. I loved Aldama. This is one of those lame-o moves that I always make fun of people for doing. I was an Aldama believer coming into that draft, but I have been really impressed for a number of reasons. Number one, he had one of the biggest box plus minus jumps year to year of anybody in this group. He was negative 5.7 last year. There were times when I would watch him where I was just like, oh my Lord, he does not belong out there. But the Grizzlies have really been patient with him. And he's up to 1.7 this year. So that's a huge thing, an indicator for players, whether or not they're going to last and be good in the league. The big thing, man, is that he's gotten in great shape. If you watched him when he was at Loyola, Maryland, he was a little puffy. I'm not saying he wasn't big, but he was moving slower. You watch him now, he's catching reverse lobs. Like, have you seen how athletic he is on some of his finishes?
Switching on defense too sometimes. Yeah. Like he wasn't mobile at all in college, and look at him now.
It's crazy. I would love to know what they've done with him physically because he's looked fantastic. But he's a play finisher, shooting the ball well. Spot ups 36.4 from 3, but he's about 9.3 points per game. On the season, he's 37.4 from 3. But he's a spot-up shooter. And if you watch, and he's a great cutter, man. If you watch the Grizzlies, Ja Morant draws a lot of eyeballs. If you get caught watching the paint dry with Ja Morant with the ball in his hands, Aldama's very clever about getting to the basket and getting easy ones. He's efficient. He's a good catch-and-shoot guy. And he's huge. He's 7 feet tall, man. I mean, do you want a 7-foot-tall guy who can hit threes and he's a great cutter and switch ball on defense? That's a great player.
Mm-hmm. And he did a good job with Jaren Jackson out earlier this season, right? Like filling in for him, starting in those games, shooting the ball better than ever before. You got to give him credit. Santi Aldama, maybe I should have taken him 12 instead of 13. How about that, though? Zach Kleiman, nails the draft nearly every year for the Grizzlies, takes him 30th, a kind of a surprise to a lot of people on draft night. And, look at us. We're taking him in the lottery ahead of Davion Mitchell, ahead of Zaire Williams, his own teammate, the guy they drafted in the lotto. It shows how quickly things can change and how you can still find good players late first round, second round, whether it's Herb Jones or Santi Aldama. Good talent can be found throughout.
Yeah, if you're smart about it. I mean, they traded up to get him, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't they trade like 33 and 34 to get him? Mm-hmm. What do you think we underrated in this draft? I was just thinking about this as we were talking about this. Like, overall, quick. I mean, we don't have to get into a huge thing about it. What do you think we underrated?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of the guys that went top 5, top 7 or so are still going there.
Yeah.
Do you mean more late first round?
It's probably more visible, I think. Well, I was thinking about the things that we overrated probably were the guys that were like scoring only, like Book Knight,
Book
Duarte.
I had him too high.
Cam Thomas has had little moments, but I'd say he's probably close to the same spot on the board. I don't know if there's been huge movement. Yeah, but
I think that's fair. I had Cam a spot ahead of Giddey.
That's crazy to think about. Right? That's crazy to think about. Yeah. Does you think? Well, maybe that's another question for another day. Is like how that would impact going forward if there were any guys like that. But I think defense too is another thing that has made guys rise on my board. Trey obviously. Herb, Santi. If Santi was like a screen door, I don't think that I would have been as, prone to move him up as high. But I don't know. It's always interesting to contemplate these things.
No, I think you're right about the defensive aspects. Maybe in the case of a guy like Trey Murphy, even though I really liked him in the draft. Maybe like overall, I don't believe many people had him late lottery. Him going 17, maybe a guy like him, you took him top 10. The importance of shooting, is that underrated? Is that one of the underrated factors? Whereas Kuminga, somebody like him, he's falling on our board right now. Some of these guys who are non-shooters, Barnes even falling from 4 to 5 in terms of the draft.
Yeah. Overall, I think it's amazing how this class just struggles shooting. Isn't it crazy? Like among the guys that are like the foremost.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Doesn't that for this year, doesn't that help? Shouldn't like a Grady Dick or a Brandon Miller, these guys already have increased confidence. Maybe is the lesson. Maybe don't bet on these guys to improve as shooters. Maybe they just won't.
Yeah.
In most cases.
Somebody should do a huge case study on growth between like age ranges. Maybe I'm volunteering myself to do that study, but I think it is fascinating to me that we still are pretty firm believers. And like among the guys at the top, I mean, Franz is the only one who's been like a semi-consistent guy among that top 5 as a shooter. The other ones we're still kind of holding strong. It's
all of them, really.
The shooting has to keep you on it's what can keep you on the floor, man. And I feel like the shooting is probably more likely to keep you on the floor, right? Than like, I'm more likely to give Quentin Grimes. Would you have taken? You wouldn't have taken Grimes ahead of Herb, right?
I think I would have taken him ahead of Herb. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's an indicator, that like I'm more likely to give a shooter the benefit of the doubt than a guy that's a good defender that's not a shooter. So
along those lines, just for the final pick in our lottery, redraft here, Davion Mitchell. The Kings take him in the top 10, and I think with him, you look at what he did his junior year. In college, he shot 45% from 3 as a junior, and that dude was going off. He was hitting everything. He looked like it was for real. After shooting 31% from 3 as a freshman and sophomore in college, well, guess what? He's shooting 32% from 3 in the NBA behind the arc, just like he did his first 2 years in college. So you could say on one hand, well, maybe he'll follow a similar trajectory and his shot will improve over the course of time from behind the arc. On the other hand, you could say he's always shot below 70% from the free throw line, and that 45% was probably just an outlier. I'm betting on the latter. And so with that said, Davion Mitchell, he's 6 feet tall. You have him behind De'Aaron Fox. You have him behind Sabonis in terms of the playmaking hierarchy for the Kings. There's no space for Mitchell to grow as a playmaker there. He's a defensive, on-ball nuisance. And that's what he does really well. But if I'm the Kings, I'm using him as a trade chip ahead of the deadline. I don't think he has a future with this franchise in a way that he could if he's able to realize his full potential. And maybe that could come back and bite you if he ends up improving as a shooter, but below 70% going back to high school, low 30% from three since college. I just don't see a lot of evidence in him, becoming a knockdown guy from behind the arc, which he would need to be to thrive next to Sabonis and Fox.
That's always the toughest bet, man, is whenever you look at the sample beyond, we always talk about checking out Cerebro and seeing what it says, is that like sometimes the sample's good leading up to college and then there's a weird downward spike, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's bad and there's an upward spike, and you have to just weigh out what those variables are and what you want to bet on. I was going to ask you, would you rather have Jose Alvarado or Davion Mitchell? Small guys, on-ball pests.
Alvarado.
Right.
Yeah. Alvarado. Well, I mean, and by the way, like, we didn't include Alvarado in that, but probably should be the choice over Mitchell. It's just, goes undrafted.
Yeah. We were kind of doing the first round.
We're doing the guys that were selected in the draft.
Sure.
But if Alvarado were in there, would you take him over any of the guys that you selected? It's just a review for the listeners. You took Mobley, Cunningham, Barnes, Murphy, Grimes, Highland, Aldama. Would you take Alvarado over any of those guys?
You could maybe convince. No, I wouldn't. I would still. I love the hell out of Alvarado, but I'd probably value him lower than those guys.
Okay, and I took Giddey, Wagner, Green, Sengun, Kuminga, Herb Jones, Davion Mitchell. I think the argument for Alvarado over Mitchell is pretty strong. He's been a better offensive player. He's, a total nuisance on defense. Maybe not better than Mitchell, because Mitchell, when you watch him, man-to-man defense, that guy can lock down. Alvarado's more of like the playmaker on defense, passing lanes,
Disruptor.
with his exactly that type of thing. He's kind of a troll on defense.
He is a troll.
But Mitchell's awesome. When I interviewed Tyrese Halliburton back in November for a thing on The Ringer, I asked him, who's the best defensive player you've ever been defended by? And he says, without missing a beat, Davion Mitchell is. And maybe he was just saying his former teammate's name, but I'm sure going against him every day in practice last season and even going against him in games as well, that's a genuine answer. Davion Mitchell still get a chance. But if I'm the Kings, by the way, Sacramento Kings, 3 seed right now in the West right now, Kyle.
Despite that mistake.
I wonder, we alluded to this earlier. There was a mystery team that offered 3 first-round draft picks for OG Anunoby, and I said how the Warriors should go for OG. How about Sacramento? Would you throw Mitchell in there, like Rashawn Holmes, Davion Mitchell, and multiple first-round draft picks? Is now the time for the Kings to make that all-in move, or is it too soon?
I would wait if I'm the Kings. I would stand and wait. There's no real reason to make a huge move right now. I mean, how high can they?
The West is open, Kyle. It's open.
Is it that open? Is it that open?
I don't know. How much worse is that team? Add OG Anunoby to Sabonis, Barnes, Murray, Herter, Fox, Monk, Lyles. That 8-man rotation, dude. How much worse is that than Denver or Memphis in the West? Or Golden State as presently constructed?
In a playoff series, I mean, they beat the snot out of Memphis last night without John Morant, though, is a key thing there. In a playoff series are just different, man. I think that it's gonna be really interesting to see how the Kings get attacked. We're gonna have a little bit of a Rosetta Stone, I feel like, for the whole situation. That's probably what I would do if I was Sacramento. Wait and see what happens. It goes both ways. Wait, you can make these moves later too. Like, wait and see what happens. See how they attack you. Address it before. Wait for the data to come in before you make a decision like that. Granted, you don't want to lose those picks. You don't want to do that.
OG's really good, Kyle.
He is. You got to convince me. I know.
He's
I'm
25 years old. 37% from 3 in his career. One of the best defenders in all of basketball. Are you really going to wait and get something better than OG Anunoby?
You don't think you'll be able to get him later? Do you really think that OG's going to be gone at the deadline this year?
If the Toronto Star report is true. And I believe it to be true, that's been kind of floating out there. If these rumors and rumblings in league circles are true, that a mystery team offered 3 firsts for OG Anunoby, Why not? Why not? Like Toronto might decide to bite if a better offer comes out that's worth taking. OG, I mean, like, where do we have him in our ringer rankings right now?
Pretty high. Well, I think we moved him into the 50s, didn't we? He was very high, but I think we moved him down. There was some OG hype in there, I think.
Yeah, we got OG at 43 right now.
Okay.
43 for OG Anunoby. Are you going to end up getting somebody better than him? I mean, are you going to get Anthony Edwards if you're the Kings? Are you going to get Desmond Bane?
No, you're not. I can safely say those guys will not be available.
Brandon Ingram, you going to get him from New Orleans? I don't know. Like who's Jaylen Brown from Boston? They traded him. Who's the better player? That's my question.
If they did it, I wouldn't be mad. That's what I'd say. I wouldn't roast them for doing that. I think it would be a good move. I think at worst, if they did that, you could just be like, should they have waited? I mean, because it would work. I mean, if you're asking me, if you're putting a gun to my head and saying, do you think that this would work? Would they be competitive? Question is, I don't know. Let me flip it to you. I mean, who do you think they can't beat in the West? In a playoff series?
I think
Denver, I think, would be tough for them.
I think all of these teams should be going all in. Denver, Memphis, Sac, New Orleans. Dallas doesn't necessarily have the assets that some of these other teams do, but if you have a chance to win the finals right now, I think you should be going all in. Yes, I do think you should be. And maybe you get to the finals and you end up getting smacked by Boston, or maybe Milwaukee's there, or Brooklyn with their deep team and their top end talent. Maybe that ends up happening. The East does have the better contenders, in my opinion. But I just think you if you get there, you get a chance. And I think the West is open right now. So for Sacramento, I didn't consider them a contender. I consider them too soon. And I do consider them too soon unless they make a move. But, there was a report, Adrian Wojnarowski earlier today said they extended their GM, Monte McNair. Well, maybe now's the time, man. If any team's going to do it, Vivek might want to take advantage of this opportunity here that they get. They're the 3 seed, making the playoffs. They're going to break the streak.
Just go ahead and break the streak. That's what. Just go ahead and break it. I don't think you don't necessarily need to do it. But also out of the other side of my mouth, I'll say defensively, I don't think their two-way prowess is up to what it needs to be. Like I think they're going to get. I just think their defensive toughness, it's just not quite there yet. You compare it against those. It would. Do you think Rashawn is enough of a rim protector? What kind of a move do you think they need? I think that's probably the move they need to make. Honestly, I mean. Or do they? I don't know. Is the OG move enough of a needle jostle or a jolt to fix those problems?
He'd add a hell of a lot, and maybe it's not. They're 23rd in defensive rating so far this season. Their offense is number 2 in the league. That's been really fueling their victories, and as you said, that can change in the postseason. But man, like if they're able to fortify that defense, why not?
Can you do that without compromising your offense, though? That's always the question.
Not if it's OG. if you're giving up Mitchell and Holmes, agent? I don't know. I love OG Anunoby.
I do too, man. He's a good player.
Kyle, this was fun. I enjoyed doing this 2021 redraft. We'll be back again next Wednesday. We'll talk more draft next week, and maybe we'll see if there's some NBA stuff to discuss as well. But more draft focus next week.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Ringers NBA Draft Show. Thank you to Jessie Lopez for producing. Hope you have a great rest of your day.